Buyers of Ghana and Ivory Coast cocoa last week agreed to a minimum price of $2,600 per ton, as proposed by the two governments to address the perceived imbalance between farmers' incomes and money made by big commodities traders. Now, the two West African nations account for nearly two-thirds of global output, yet they exert limited influence over international cocoa prices, which have stayed low in recent years due to overproduction. And joining me now to look at this trend on global cocoa production is one of the research analysts with financial derivatives company, Tobiloba Ogunbolu. Hello, Toby. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So Ivory Coast and Ghana are the two leading cocoa producers in the world. Both countries are responsible for about 60% of global production. Now, they recently tried to establish a price floor. This has not been that successful as OPEC's production and price leadership role. So why is this so, and what can be done to make the suppliers become price leaders?
Okay, so the floor of 2,600 is the least amount the price of cocoa can fall to. So, for example, if there's a reduction in production and the price reduces to about $2,000, then we expect, the government to compensate the farmers, and we expect the leading producers, that's Ivory Coast and Ghana, to reduce their own supply or their output such that the price can stabilize.
Nigeria is the fourth largest cocoa producer in the world. The cultivation of cocoa employs about 300,000 farmers in the country. Now, cocoa also constitutes a major source of foreign exchange for the government. What effect then will recent initiatives like the 5-year plan for revitalizing cocoa productivity in existing plantations formulated by partnerships in the Niger Delta and the establishment of a 200-hectare hybrid cocoa plantation have on the cocoa sector in Nigeria?
Okay, so all these are good for Nigeria because we know that Nigeria is the fourth largest producer of cocoa. So an increase in the outputs from all these nice developments would translate to higher export revenue, higher external reserves too for Nigeria. So all these developments are good, and we expect this to translate to higher foreign exchange for Nigeria, higher external reserves too.
When we look at cocoa processing companies and, of course, the confectionaries, they have set ambitious deadlines for boycotting cocoa from countries which exploit child labor by 2020. Now, this deadline now seems unattainable as over 2 million children still work on farms in sub-Saharan Africa. What will be the impact of full enforcement of this rule on the economies of African producers?
Okay, so we know these countries are using child labor because they are cheap, but we know that the abolishment of child labor in the short term would mean that output will reduce because this is the main way they use for production. But in the short to long term, we expect countries to shift from child labor to the use of technology. As we know, technology is more efficient, so we expect in the short term and the long term, we expect outputs to increase, and we expect prices for this commodity to also improve in the near term.
All right, thank you for your time, Tobiloba. And Ethiopia is rationing electricity for domestic and industrial customers in one of Africa's fastest growing economies. The country has also suspended electricity exports worth $82 million a year to neighboring Djibouti and Sudan. The government says the drop in water levels in the country's hydroelectric dams has led to production deficits.
Johan Retta runs a barber shop in the capital Addis Ababa. He says he now depends on a generator to power light and equipment at the shop.
This situation is very upsetting, really. Even the so-called power rationing shifts are not predictable. You cannot prepare for it. Fortunately, I have a generator which I bought recently on loan. My situation is a bit better. Those who don't have a generator are left with no option but to close their shops and roam around when there's no power.
Ethiopia announced last week that it has been forced to start rationing power after a drop in water levels in hydroelectric dams led to a production deficit. The drop in water levels at the country's Gaib 3 dam had led to a deficit of 476 megawatts, more than a third of the country's electricity generation of 1,400 megawatts. Ethiopia has also suspended electricity exports to neighboring Djibouti and Sudan, which earns the country $82 million a year. Lingering effects of past drought blamed on climate change continue to be felt in the country. Our contribution to the climate change is very, very minute. Despite this, climate change is having a very heavy toll on us. We cannot see the current problem outside this issue. Unless we are tied up with financial constraints, we will be forced to look around for solutions that will set us free from the effects of climate change. Both the drought and a spate of ethnic clashes, mostly in the southwest and east, prompted an Ethiopian government appeal for $1.3 billion to provide emergency food and non-food assistance for 8.3 million people in March.
You know that we have huge potential in hydropower. It is estimated we have 45,000 megawatt from electric alone, significant amount from geothermal, and surprisingly, over 1.3 million on wind. So we can exploit those things. If we exploit all this, let alone for Ethiopia, it could be for the whole of Africa.
Under the rationing program, which runs until July, domestic consumers will face blackouts for several hours a day, while cement and steel firms will have to operate fewer shifts due to the cuts.
And finally, Namibia is to host a two-day economic summit, which is expected to attract at least $1 billion worth of investment over the next 2 years. Namibia's economy has contracted for the last 2 years, and the Southwest African nation has been ravaged by a drought, which the meteorological services estimate to be the deadliest in 90 years. The economic summit, which will take place from July 31 to August 1 in the capital, Windhoek, is aimed at reviving and growing the Namibian economy, creating job opportunities and attracting investment opportunities. And that's the wrap on the show. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimizi Obi Iwabu.